Heaven and hell. Heaven and hell are from the human race. 2. 5. Most of those who had recently died, then they saw themselves to be living men as before, and in the like state, for after death every one's state of life is at first such as it was in the world, but there is a gradual change in it, either into heaven or into hell. Were moved by new joy at being alive, saying that they had not believed that it would be so. But they greatly wondered that they should have lived in such ignorance and blindness about the state of their life after death, and especially that the man of the church should be in such ignorance and blindness, when above all others in the whole world he might be clearly enlightened in regard to these things. Then they began to see the cause of that blindness and ignorance, which is, that external things, which are things relating to the world and the body, had so occupied and filled their minds that they could not be raised into the light of heaven and consider the things of the church beyond doctrinal matters. For when matters relating to the body and the world are loved as much as they are at the present day, nothing but darkness flows into the mind when they go further. There are few in Christendom at this day who believe that man rises again immediately after death. Preface to Genesis 16. But it is believed that he will rise again at the time of the last judgment, when the visible world will perish. The reason of this belief: nevertheless man does rise again immediately after death, and then he is a man in all respects, and in every least respect. The soul that lives after death is the spirit of man, which in man is the man himself, and in the other life is in a complete human form. From experience, from the word. What is meant by the dead scene in the holy city? Matt 27:53. In what manner man is raised from the dead? From experience. His state after his resurrection. False opinions about the soul and its resurrection. 313. Very many of the learned from the Christian world are astonished when they see themselves after death in a body, in garments, and in houses, as in the world. And when they recall what they had thought about the life after death, the soul, spirits, and heaven and hell, they are ashamed and say that they thought foolishly, and that the simple in faith thought much more wisely than they. Learned men who confirmed themselves in such ideas and ascribed all things to nature were examined, and it was found that their interiors were wholly closed up and their exteriors were open, so that they did not look to heaven, but to the world, and also therefore to hell. For to the extent that man's interiors are open he looks to heaven, but to the extent that his interiors are closed and his exteriors open he looks to hell, because the interiors of man are formed for the reception of all things of heaven, but the exteriors for the reception of all things of the world. And those who receive the world, and not heaven at the same time, receive hell. In man the spiritual world and the natural world are conjoined. The internal of man is formed after the image of heaven, but the external after the image of the world. 314. That heaven is from the human race can be confirmed also from the fact that angelic minds and human minds are alike, both enjoying the ability to understand, perceive and will, and both having been formed to receive heaven. For the human mind is just as capable of becoming wise as the angelic mind, and if it does not attain to such wisdom in the world, it is because it is in an earthly body, and in that body its spiritual mind thinks naturally. But it is otherwise when the mind is loosed from the bonds of that body. Then it no longer thinks naturally, but spiritually, and when it thinks spiritually, then its thoughts are incomprehensible and ineffable to the natural man. Thus it becomes wise like an angel, all of which confirms that the internal part of man, called his spirit, is in its essence an angel, and when loosed from the earthly body is equally in the human form and an angel. However, the internal of man has not been opened above but only beneath. It is still, after it has been loosed from the body, in a human form, but a horrible and diabolical form, for it is not able to look upwards towards heaven but only downwards towards hell. There are as many degrees of life in man as there are heavens, and they are opened after death in accordance with his life. Heaven is in man. Men who are living a life of love and charity have in them angelic wisdom, although it is for the time hidden, but they come into that wisdom after death. The man who receives from the Lord the good of love and of faith is called in the word an angel. 315. Moreover, anyone who has been taught about divine order can understand that man was created to become an angel, because in him is the ultimate of order, in which what belongs to heavenly and angelic wisdom can be brought into form and can be restored and multiplied. Divine order never stops midway there to form a something apart from an ultimate, for it is not in its fullness and completion there, but it goes on to the ultimate, and when it is in its ultimate it takes on its form, and by means there collected, it renews itself and produces itself further, which is accomplished through procreations. Therefore the seed ground of heaven is in the ultimate. 316. The Lord rose again not as to his spirit alone but also as to his body, because when he was in the world he glorified his whole human, that is, he made it divine. For his soul which he had from the Father was of itself the very divine, while his body became a likeness of the soul, that is, of the Father, thus also divine. This is why he, differently from any man, rose again as to both, and this he made manifest to the disciples who when they saw him believed that they saw the Spirit, by saying, "See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bones as ye see me have." Luke 24:36-39, indicating thereby that he was man not only as to the spirit but also as to the body. Man rises again only as to his spirit. The Lord alone rose again in respect of his body also. 317. That it might be known that man lives after death and comes, in accordance with his life in the world, either into heaven or into hell. Many things have been disclosed to me about the state of man after death, which will be presented into order in the following pages, where the world of spirits is treated of. Next, I will post the heathen, or peoples outside the church, in heaven. 1. Thank you.